wants to go back. It is placed publicly on our public website, so anyone can always go back and review any of the virtual meetings that we have. My name is Leslie Lenhart. I'm the Director of Communications and Media Relations, and I have with me Anna Swartz-Warmbrand, who is our Director of Student Relations, who will be doing a short presentation, and then we are really looking to hear from you on your thoughts of how things are going, possible adjustments we might want to consider to help the committee as they go forward in developing their suggestions of the changes we might have. Just a couple room keeping items. We will wait until after Anna finishes before we answer any questions or allow you to speak. Also, if you do want to speak or ask, provide a question or other different information, if you would be so kind to put your name in the chat, I will call on you in the order that the names come up. That way we give everybody a chance and we don't miss anyone. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Anna, and thanks you everyone for being here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our third virtual Code of Conduct forum. We have had 5 in person, so this will make our 8th community forum. I am the Director of Student Relations, and I am facilitating our stakeholder input process for revisions to our current Code of Conduct. We have a committee, and we'll be speaking about that shortly, that is looking at ways to revise the Code of Conduct, and we do not want to do these revisions without hearing from all of the voices in our community, students, parents, staff, for sure, and anyone else who supports TUSD in our community. So thank you so much for just taking some time this evening. I want to make sure that we have equity of voice. So if there are folks that are wanting to talk and they're putting their names in the chat, that we're making room for what they need to speak about as well. And before I start the presentation, I just want to let you know that by all means, we want to hear your voices and your concerns with the Code of Conduct, the levels that things should be leveled, and what your concerns and questions are. That said, if you have individual incidents with your child, staff incidents, things happening with your administration that are very specific, please reach out to me individually if it's something that I can help you solve. This forum is to get feedback on the usage of the Code of Conduct, not to share individual pieces and parts. And I understand if you're a parent and you have a concern about your child, this could have been an opportunity to share. And if you have very broad questions or opinions about the Code of Conduct, absolutely, this is the spot, but I will not be discussing particular instances in relation to children in a community forum. That's not the appropriate space for it. So just wanted to give that right up front so that we can be very productive. And I am super excited because I see that there are students here from TUSD in this wonderful meeting. So what I'm going to say, because it's kids first here in TUSD. So I'm going to give this presentation very quickly, and then there'll be the first voices that we hear from after that. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share, and then we'll get the night going here. Hopefully we are all able to see what's happening.
Yes,
so
it's now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we are here this evening for our community forum virtually about our Code of Conduct. Why are we revising the Code of Conduct? Well, every 3 to 5 years, it's always good practice to gather stakeholder input and revise a Code of Conduct. This is an important document that really dictates how adults interface with student behavior here in TUSD. After the pandemic, our world is a different place, and we want to make sure that that Code of Conduct is meeting our needs as a TUSD community. We have a group of representative stakeholders that have been identified based upon the groups of people that they represent. So we have Brian Lambert representing all of district leadership. He is a regional superintendent for the mighty Region 1. I am facilitating this internal committee. I am not a voting member, so I don't vote in any of the decision making, but I do facilitate those pieces and processes that the committee does engage with, as well as being in charge of putting together all of the revisions that stakeholders have to present to the school board. We have a variety of folks that are representing our equity and diversity departments. So you can see we have a representative from African American Student Services, Mexican American Student Services, Native American Student Services, our Pan-Asian students, and our refugee students as well as Voices of Equity as program coordinators and managers in the EDI department. We also have site administrators that have been elected from their association to represent admin voice. We have 2 elementary principals, 2 middle school folks, and 2 high school folks. You'll also see that we have TEA represented. So we have our teacher voices and our classified reps as well. And just so you know, our Voices of Equity, a portion of those folks are also our classified folk. We have Michael Arnoff. He is our legal counsel who sits with us to advise us and support 2 parents. And oftentimes Tina Escalante, my admin assistant, joins us just to take notes and help things move along. So that's our internal committee. We have a timeline that we've been working with. In January, we established norms for our committee. We actually established the committee. We created our presentation that you're seeing tonight, and we created all of our meeting content for that stakeholder meeting. And so that was a big lift in January, was getting ourselves organized. This past month, we conducted in-person community forums. Palo Verde, Innovation Tech, Tucson High, Cholla, and Saguaro last night, and that's 1 per region. And we'll be holding student forums at each of our comprehensive high schools. So we are also in the process of creating survey content as well. And so all parents and community here in TUSD will have an opportunity to fill out a survey, as well as staff members. Moving into this fine month, we're going to have these surveys sent out within the first few weeks of March. Our shortage for internet delayed us just a tiny bit, but we're also going to be collecting that survey data as it comes in and analyzing what stakeholder input is. We're going to take data from our student forums and our community forums, and we're going to share it internally with our committee so that they see what all of our stakeholders are sharing. And we're going to make our revisions based upon our stakeholder groups and all of the ways that our stakeholders interface, whether it be virtually, in person, school sites, cafecitos, community forums, emailing through the email, all of those pieces and parts. And then in May, the revised code of conduct will be presented to the school board for approval. Of course, our school board makes our final approval. We have a link here in the presentation in case people want to go back and see some pieces and parts. And this shows you how many community forums we've walked through. Yesterday, we had our mighty Saguaro community forum for the Pantano region. And tonight you'll see your Thursday, March 9th. We have an email. We have our current code of conduct resource. We have a request form if you'd like it. And then we have links to the EDI pages. And we have some focus questions. And so before we jump into these focus questions, I'm just going to read them out so that you know what we may discuss or may not. It depends on what y'all would like to talk about tonight. But some hot topics that have surfaced, and this being our 8th one, these are things that people have brought in the previous community forums, whether it be virtual or whether it be actually via our email or whether it be our in-person. So these are hot topics that have surfaced that we would like everyone's input on. However, if you have something else you'd like to discuss or give input on in terms of what we need for our code of conduct, of course, this is your community forum. So first is, do you believe it is appropriate for the dress code to be included in the code of conduct? If so, what level of infraction? Like, should there be consequences for kids out of dress code, essentially? Number two, currently in our code of conduct, after a student's first fight, the consequences include 1 day of suspension with a restorative mediation, and they're allowed back onto campus. Does this seem appropriate for a fight for the student to just be gone 1 day? Also, with drug offenses, if you have a first offense, then you are asked to take a drug awareness class. And if you do that, then you receive just a 1 day suspension for use. And should this be a continued practice, or should we relook at our policies and pieces and parts for drug usage on campus? Truancy has surfaced as a concern, kids not being in class when they need to be. It's a level 2 offense, so it does not carry any exclusionary practice. Is this appropriate? And lastly, our defiance and disrespect has 2 levels. Level 3 is if the disrespect is toward an adult, and level 2 is if the disrespect is towards another student. And do you believe that these are correctly labeled? So level 3 offenses can carry in-house or out-of-school suspension, but level 2 offenses cannot. So those are pieces and parts that have surfaced. I'm going to stop sharing right now, and we can always go back to these questions if need be, but I wanted to hear from our students first and foremost.
So I know I have 2 people's names in the chat, but I don't know if they're the students. The first one in the chat is Jeremiah Garcia.
Yeah, I feel like the dress code, I don't think that seems, I think it should be higher than just like just like 1 day suspension, like not telling them not to do that. I think it should be higher, or else they're just gonna do it again and keep doing it, wearing inappropriate dresses or clothing.
Okay, so you think there should be stronger consequences than
Yeah.
what exists for a dress code violation? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And we're recording all of this input, just so you know.
Yeah.
I'm not writing it down. That's why Ms. Leinhardt is recording it, so that we have a record. Okay, what else do you want to share with us, Jeremiah?
And I also want to do vandalism,
Okay.
because I feel that like vandalism, I feel like it depends on what they draw and where they draw it. Like if it's like public and like where lots of people can see, then maybe it should be like higher. Or if it's like private, like a little space where not really many can see, they could just clean it off. And
Okay.
it kind of depends on what they draw, like if it's offensive or not.
So making a distinction or a difference in the code of conduct between making, like, say, for example, a silly drawing on something that isn't the wall in the school versus making something very offensive on a bathroom stall. So in the code of conduct, making the words very specific about what would carry suspension and what wouldn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that input, Jeremiah. What else do you have to share with us this evening?
And also theft.
Mm-hmm.
Stealing and theft. I feel that it should be higher as well, because they're also going to keep doing it. Like dress code. And they're and it's taking other people's stuff. I feel like it should be how do you say it? I should like not 1 day suspension, because then they know it's just gonna be 1 day that they're gonna be gone from school, that they really don't care. And I know some people don't even like school, so it's like a award for them.
So being really careful about when we put kids in an in-school suspension environment versus an out-of-school suspension environment.
Yeah.
Because for some kids, that out-of-school is actually more fun than if they had to stay in school and get their work. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Good. That's really good feedback. What else do you have for us tonight, Jeremiah?
Wait, hold up. So I also want to talk about disrespect to teachers.
Okay, wonderful. Wow, you're hitting all of our hot topics tonight, Jeremiah. I'm proud of you. Good job. We're mind melding, my friend.
Yeah, because like if they disrespect teachers, then because teachers get out of their way to teach them. And I feel like it should be a lot more because the teachers are actually helping them learn with their education while the students are just like being mean to them, like disrespecting them. So I feel like it shouldn't be like a 1-day suspension or any like 2-day suspension. I think it should be like worse, like helping out around school, like serving jury time.
Oh. Okay. Okay, so having some more options is what I'm hearing. Having some more options for what kids can do to make the situation right. That isn't just a detention or a suspension.
Yes.
That's wonderful. And aside from hearing your wonderful voice, did you all have a presentation or because I'm seeing now in the chat that you're part of the Mighty Sapphire community here. Are you student council, Jeremiah?
Yes.
Wow. This is my best night. You know that? Because student voices is what this is all about. Good job.
I thought you meant student court. Yeah, I'm in student court, but not student council.
Even better, because you know what? I work with the lawyers all the time with our code of conduct. So you are right in line, young man. Well done. Okay. I'm sorry. I just got so excited to hear from you. What else do you have to say representing student court, Jeremiah?
And my last one would have to be vaping.
Okay.
And the drug usage. Because I do see lots of people vaping and using drugs in the bathroom every time. And like, I feel like if there's one time, the first time, I feel like it should be not as strong, like a 3 at least.
Okay.
But if it's multiple times, it should bump up to a 4 or a 5 because they've already had a warning about it. And especially if they're sharing it.
Sure.
Because then they're bringing more people in the in trouble.
Okay. So
and then they could cause other people to like start smoking, and then their education could be ruined by that.
So what I'm hearing you say for our drug offenses is we as a committee may want to consider a minimum of a 3-day suspension, in or out, right? Depending on if the kid is safe at home and what the choices are, but a 3-day minimum for a drug offense is that, you know, more than 1 day. The administrator should have an option for more than 1 day.
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Is there anything else that you have for us this evening?
No.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeremiah. Your input, I will tell you that you are one of the most articulate participants we've had in these community forums. And that means that you were right on point. Lots of people come and they say lots of things, but you were exactly right on task for exactly what needed to be said tonight. So that's wonderful. Who else do we have to share? And I will more than happily share those 5 points back up on the screen.
Yes, that was, if we could share the 5 points. And then we have Veronica Nelson, who is also a parent and one of our middle school counselors. Veronica?
Okay, wonderful.
Okay. Hi there. Let me get my video going. Hopefully you can see me. Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi. So my family just moved to Tucson at the last summer. So we're kind of new to the state and everything. and we were up in the Pacific Northwest. And one of the things that I feel very strongly about as a parent and also as an educator is the dress code. I feel like we need to make major changes in that, specifically to have it non-gendered specific and to have it where it is applicable to any gender or all genders. Because if we look at the history of many of the dress codes in the United States, they are sexist and they are racist in their origins. And if you look at some of the things that they outline, like gang colors, things like that, you know, or different types of natural hair, those things have just kind of aren't appropriate. And so I would like to recommend that we look at the Portland School District up in the Pacific Northwest. They redid their dress code to be very not specific about different things. Like you need to have your chest covered and your butt covered, because I have seen girls who are 12, 13 standing in an office with multiple staff looking at them and deciding if their skirt is long enough with a fingertip. And we all know that we have different bodies and shapes, and you know, some girls who are bustier are going to get dress coded more often than a flat chested person. And I don't feel it's the right message that we're sending, especially to girls, that, you know, the appropriateness of their dress is worthy of taking them out of class. I want them to be in class learning, and it's not a distraction if an inch of their thigh shows or a bit of their shoulder. Those things, you know, we need to address in other ways if boys are unable to control themselves by seeing, you know, a little bit of skin, which is usually what has been kind of one of the things that people have said is, you know, we have to do this for the boys. No, the boys need to learn to control themselves. And the girls, you know, again, this goes back to like parents and them learning to honor themselves and how they look. But I hate to see kids out of class for dress code. It's a shaming situation. It also teaches girls that it's okay to have people judge you and look you up and down and decide if you're appropriate or if you're okay. And I just think that's sending the wrong message to these kids. So that's my one thing. The other piece I would like to add is that I feel like a lot of the consequences require out of school suspension. I feel like we really need to push to have you know, if it does require suspension, starting with in-school suspension, these kids get out of the school, they're not going to work at home. It's, you know, it's not helping their education. And again, yes, we need consequences. We need some structure for that, but I feel like we need to prioritize in school as much as possible, because that's why they're there. That's why we have these kids, is for them to learn, and they're not going to do that when they're kicked out for a mandatory 30 days or whatever it is. So, and I'd like to also see more flexibility, because depending on the school and the school culture and climate, the admin, the relationships that we have, I feel like we need to trust them and their ability to determine if that's an appropriate thing, instead of having a mandatory out of school suspension on especially if it's not a safety issue. So.
Okay, thank you so much for your input. Your stance on dress code has been echoed at pretty much every single community forum, just so you know. And there are definitely voices that have other opinions, right? We're a pretty diverse community here. We serve 41,000 students, but we have definitely heard, and in particular from our LGBTQ community as well, that when we look at our dress code and how we interface with that we're taking their needs in account as well, because that's another group of stakeholders that has come forward and expressed that the dress code can sometimes, how people are dress coded, be discriminatory for those kiddos as well. So thank you for that. And looking for alternatives to keep our kids in school, right? That's the name of the game. So thank you so much for your input, Veronica. We appreciate you.
Great. Thank you. Our next speaker is Eric Hertwig. Eric, are you here and can unmute yourself?
Please let me know if you can hear me.
Yes, you're great.
We
Thank you. Go
can,
ahead.
yes.
All right, thank you. Since we've been talking about the dress code, I'd like to address a little bit about it myself as a male teacher. If I were to dress code a female student, there will be a sexual accusation against me, possibly, potentially, if something like this would come up. So often as a teacher, if I see there's a dress code issue, I would ask the student how Miss Adams would approach how they were dressed, and then let them tell me so they can dress code themselves. Otherwise, if it's a serious violation, I just email the office. But definitely that's something that we should address, because I agree that it's not levied equally against boys and girls. Number two, after a student is involved in a fight, 1 week in February, there were 4 employees at Choya that were assaulted by students. And if this is a 1-day suspension, that's a joke. If a teacher puts their hand on a student, there's a 5 to 7 day investigation where the teacher is off campus. That should be a minimum 5 to 7 days for a student to be off campus if they put their hands on a teacher. Number 3, I agree with Jeremiah. Every school should probably have a student court where administration, teachers, and students will look at drug offenses. I believe if you're a seller, you should have loftier punishments compared to someone who would just be caught using on a first time. So I don't think there should be 1 day this, 2 day that we currently have. I think there should be multiple inputs depending on how frequently the person offends this policy. And number 4, truancy. I heard a number that Choya has a 70% or higher truancy level. It is awful at Choya. And in my first period class, I started with 34 students in that class. I've got 29 now. And often I am teaching to just 6 kids. We've got to do something. We've got hundreds of kids outside of class at any given point, any period at Choya. And we need to have a completely different system in place. And number 5, defiance and disrespect. Excuse me. When something like this happens at Choya, nothing is ever done about it. I think the levels that we've got on the current code of conduct at the school, it's too difficult for a teacher to get intervention. And if something happens in the classroom, it takes way too long for a monitor to get to the room. Many of us are at Choya, are in a room by ourselves where there's no other teacher nearby to get help. We have asked for in the past to have more monitors at Choya. We used to have 10 at one time, and we've got 6 now if nobody calls in sick. And we've got more than 6 buildings.
Yeah. So I'll start with number 5 and then work back up. Definitely from staff members, we have heard in these community forums, looking again at the levels of defiance and disrespect. And in our code of conduct, when you are defying and disrespecting an adult, it is a level 3 offense. It does carry a short-term suspension option for the school administrator. And that's something where typically administrators had been asking for a request to elevate discipline for that because it had sat in a level 2 space. But after a few months into this position, I really worked with admin to empower them to look back at the code and see that it is a level 3. I don't want kids out of school. I don't think any of us do. And also the adults that are staffed here at our school sites absolutely should be able to come to work and feel safe and respected. So finding that balance is definitely important. Truancy, all of our comprehensive high schools, there have been echoes of developing truancy plans and pieces and parts. And so what we've heard a lot from students and from community parents is because a child's truant, we wouldn't issue then an out of school suspension because we want them in class. But what recourse do schools have, and how do we encourage kids to be there? So that is an absolutely robust discussion that happens here at these forums. The drug offense piece in part, we do have for sale and distribution and sharing, there is a higher level that most students are taken to a long-term hearing for a hearing officer to determine. The fight piece in part, we are probably one of the only districts in the state that has a 1-day suspension with a mediation option. Most school sites, most districts, with at least for our high school students, will have longer days of exclusionary practice. We are literally, I believe, the only one that has a 1-day piece in part. And just so you all know, our internal committee started our process with looking at a variety of different code of conducts all throughout the state of Arizona. And so we could get a gauge as to what other districts are doing and how we're addressing it. And then the dress code piece in part, again, I respect what you're saying about having being very careful about what you do in dress code spaces with young ladies and how you address that piece in part. We need to be very careful and conscious as we do that. So thank you for your input from Choya. That's huge. That means a lot. We didn't have a huge turnout at our Choya Community Forum, so you being here is very helpful because I really, really want to hear from that community. You're such a big comprehensive high school and you anchor the West Side so well. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you. Our next speaker is Kirsten Daniels.
Hi, I am a TUSD parent, a former TUSD teacher, and currently a high school CSP. And I wanted to address number 4 with the truancy. One of the things that I've noticed is the inability of our admin to kind of escalate discipline or escalate levels based on repeat offenders. I echo what Eric said, and at our high school campus, we do have many students out of class all of the time, but it tends to be the same students or the same group of students over again, and they kind of pop to the office, get a verbal reprimand, and then go back to class and then do it again the next period. So, but I've heard from admin that there are difficulties sort of escalating disciplinary issues or escalating levels with repeat offenders. Similarly, with issues having to do with drugs or fights, a lot of, I've seen and heard and been part of a lot of issues with issuing discipline to students without appropriate observations of past behavior. So we have had very disturbing and traumatic physical violence on our campus, and students who were then suspended for 1 day, or even question whether or not they were able to be anyway, whether it was able to be elevated because they didn't have any prior history or observations in synergy. And so that is an issue that I see coming up, that students who are maybe a one-time, this is the first time they've been in trouble, but they've done something like assault an adult on campus, are kind of getting a warning or 1 day suspension. And then one of the things that I've noticed that's not on here is cell phone policy and cell phone usage. I don't know if that falls into code of conduct, but that does at our campus. And I'm sure that we're not the only ones directly relate to number 3 and number 4, or sorry, and number 2. A lot of inciting of physical assault and bullying through group text messaging during the school day, a lot of communicating about buying and selling drugs, and meeting in the bathroom via text messages, and our level of truancy, students kind of meeting up with each other, which historically has always been a thing. I know that cell phones aren't that much different than note passing or writing things on the bathroom wall or word of mouth, but the cell phone issue at our campus particularly has led to seems like a lot of unnecessary drama, a lot of things that have sort of seemed to get away from engagement in the classroom and respect and engagement with the adults that run the classroom. So thank you.
I definitely appreciate that input. And speaking to the pieces and parts in the code of conduct, it's called right ongoing and escalating. And so that's oftentimes where administrators, there are certain violations where they can't do what we would call exclusionary practices. They can't engage with certain consequences, not even just suspensions, but without having proof that the situation is ongoing and escalating. And so some things that have just started to surface in our internal steering committee and things that have been discussed, in other districts and ways they look at it is not so much as the behavior ongoing and escalating, but what interventions are in place, have been in place, or what interventions are we going to put into place. So instead of having every piece and part of that child's behavior documented to show history for an administrator to then take action, rather what are the supports that we've given to the child, and so looking at it just through a different lens. The truancy piece is hard, I'll tell you, because what do we do systemically to ensure they're in class? And so our recourse in the current code of conduct is very little, but then to escalate that, right, would be exclusionary, and we're trying to keep them in class. So that's in and where the debate always sits. And there's not an easy solution by no means, but I definitely appreciate that input. And this is probably you're maybe the third person in all of our forums to bring up cell phone stuff. Interestingly enough, I thought that it would come up a lot, but we're definitely taking that input. And that's something that I do take counsel from our legal counsel about, just as to where our reach sits and where it doesn't. Right, because that makes a huge difference. And a staff member's not feeling safe or being assaulted it can be very severe and prevalent depending on the day of the week or what organization we're serving. And so making sure our staff is safe and that there is proper recourse for folks is very important. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kirsten. All right, our next speaker is Audrey Davidson. Audrey?
Hi, I'm here. I definitely resonate with a lot of the things that people are saying regarding specifically like cell phone use, and also just how to balance hard consequences with giving kids like restorative practices. And I've taught in a lot of districts. I've taught in New Orleans, I've taught like all around. And like one thing that I think is really important is that we build our schools up, especially in high school, where like maybe we can change things with our freshman class and like build it in more. I'm trying to talk about it in a linear way, like, because I know a lot of my students, because I teach both Avid and English, and they're aware of these issues that we have on campus. And there are a lot of students who work really hard every single day, and they don't necessarily feel completely safe on campus, like especially with the drug use, like in the bathrooms. And I know that's prevalent like throughout with like just the introduction of vape pens and things like that. But I would echo like what one of our students, like at the beginning, like what he said, just about like maybe like strengthening consequences about certain things. And I know like from a legal aspect, maybe that's hard, but like maybe we need to build like more student engagement, like through, student council or through Avid or through these programs we already have, where the kids who are coming in every day to work, like they don't feel penalized because like some kids aren't doing the right things. Like those are our leaders, and those voices need to be elevated. And I know like from my experience, just like in the very different school environments I've taught in, that I've seen this happen. And I've seen kids like be able to like bring things to the table and like have very creative, I guess, solutions to things that they see every day, like even things like, like some kids have said like, oh yeah, like in the boys' bathroom, like if somebody comes in to pee, like they'll stop doing the vaping. And then in the girls' bathroom, like the girls were like, oh my God, that never happens in there, right? But we know for a fact, because we can smell in the hallways, that this is an issue. So like, I think for me as a teacher who's taught in these different environments, like my biggest like push would be to figure out something about like the vaping at school, because just like the shamelessness and the audacity, and it's like it impacts the other kids. It's like they can get contact high, or they don't want to go to the bathroom. They want to go to the nurse because they can't go to the bathroom in peace. And like that's not fair to them. So I guess like that's my biggest thing that I would say as far as that's concerned. And that's one of the biggest issues I see just as a teacher, because just like I can't remember his name, but just like the little boy at the beginning said, like those are like our main things. Like, and I don't think it's just, you know, he sounded like he was in middle school, or maybe I'm wrong, but like it starts in middle school and it continues. So like if we can maybe just create like something in the code of conduct that like stops the issues that we know are like destroying school culture and like destroying community, like really good kids that like are excited to be at school like get exasperated and exhausted because, and I don't believe in like good or bad kids, but you know, like kids who are like really motivated, like there, and then the kids who aren't, like they are hurting, and we need to do more to kind of rectify that issue, because like them vaping in the bathroom isn't necessarily like them being bad or like doing something wrong. Like there's something more to that. And I like understand like how we're giving like the drug classes and things like that, but like maybe at a bigger level, like through advisory or something like that, like we could actually like have these one-on-one conversations with our students to make them like think through these things that they're doing and how it's impacting the people around them. So yeah, that's like mostly what I have to say.
That's wonderful input. I definitely appreciate that. And I like your perspective on taking the whole child. Oftentimes at hearings when we have kids who are using drugs on campus, particularly marijuana, they will say, you know, I'm anxious. Like I don't want to function in my day without this piece and part. And so really taking into account that those kids are also, of course, struggling, but then ensuring that our restrooms are safe and that kids who are excited to be there feel safe in the restroom. So looking again at our drug offenses absolutely is something that we need to do. So I appreciate your perspective and in seeing both sides of what needs to exist. You're not the only person to share these similar sentiments. I just want you to know.
Okay, great. I know we have 4 more speakers for sure. I'm just going to tell the order so that you all know. We have Richard Rubin, Joshua Schulter, Mulia Thurston, and then Jeremiah Garcia again. So Richard, if you'd like to start, we only have about 15 minutes. So if we could be concise, that would be super great, because we want to make sure everybody's voice is heard.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? I hope so.
Hi, yes.
Hi. So one of the things I've noticed, first off, I work at Choya, so I work with the high school kids.
Okay.
I've noticed that a lot of our disciplinary actions seem to be targeted towards like what an elementary school kid could get if they, you know, if they're caught ditching or fighting or something. And that concerns me because, you know, as a high school teacher, I mean, I see high school kids every day who are a couple years away from going out into the real world, which means, you know, they're a lot stronger than an elementary kid. So if a high school kid hits a teacher, that has more effect on the teacher than, you know, if an elementary kid hits a teacher, because, well, for obvious reasons. And then same thing for, you know, if they get caught with drugs, or if they're ditching, or if they're just being disrespectful. I feel that it would be beneficial actually to the older kids if they were to get, you know, quote unquote, charged in a way that they would get in trouble with if they did something like that outside of school. Right. So like if they hit another adult, a 14-year-old kid could get charged with, you know, with law enforcement and things like that. So so perhaps it would make more sense, I think, if each disciplinary thing was more based on, okay, is this kid a senior in high school, or are they, you know, a first grader in elementary school, and then maybe we can go from there.
I will tell you, Richard, that is the first consensus item that our internal steering committee actually came to is, and it's a revision we'll recommend. Of course, our school board will make the final determination, but we would like to break up the code of conduct into a section for elementary, a section for middle, and a section for high school. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Our next speaker is, sorry, lost where I was, Joshua Schulter.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay. So I specifically wanted to talk about number 4 here.
Okay.
So in particular, I seem to recall that like in previous codes of conduct, and I think for like a significant amount of time, truancy had at least as potential consequences loss of credit or unenrollment in particular courses. Used to be if you were absent unexcused from like one of your periods, even if that was the only one you were ditching, if you were unexcused absent 10 times over the course of a semester, not in a row, not every single class, just one class you didn't show up to 10 times unexcused, you were just automatically dropped. Even if it's not automatic, but if that were an option, I think that's a sort of consequence that students might actually pay attention to. This was also coupled with a number of tardies counting as an absence as well. With, like, I had a student last semester who was tardy 67 times. And this had no consequence on his ability to pass the course.
Okay. Well, and you are right. There are other districts that do have a policy of like 10 tardies equals 1 absence, or a certain amount of tardies equals 1 absence, and then a certain amount of absences, and you will not receive credit for the class. That is absolutely true. There are many districts that have that type of system.
And like, I could definitely see the argument, especially in the light of the pandemic, for not making that a mandatory immediate drop.
Sure.
Mojave used to just do that without anybody interacting with it at all. But having that like as an option,
sure,
where like the administrator and the teacher can like come into agreement and say, okay, this student hasn't been here 10 days and they don't seem to be trying to do the work independently or outside of class either, it might be best to just drop them. Because I have at least one student who cannot show up to my first period class. She's contacted me. She like has to take care of her like little sister or whatever for like an hour in the morning, and she's doing the work. Like she might actually legitimately be able to like understand the material well enough and do enough of the work to pass the class without ever showing up to my classroom. And I want her to have that opportunity without the automatic consequence.
Sure. So looking at it on a case-by-case basis, depending on situation, because since the pandemic, the world has changed. And so people, their abilities to interface with curriculum are more now than they were. So I really appreciate that input. I know that there are attendance requirements for passing in pieces and parts, but looking at that truancy and how that factors in. All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So Anna, I'm going to have Ben Goodrich. He's from Safford K-8. He'd like to speak and then have his 2 students speak next. So
wonderful.
Yeah, so at Safford, we've implemented a teen or a student court, whatever you'd like to call it. And Jeremiah and I believe Malia, who's going to go next, are 2 of my students. And we've come up with a list of, I think it was like 11 or 12 items. We narrowed it down to top 7. Jeremiah hit on 3 of them. I don't know if Malia is going to hit on the same ones or other ones. I've been out sick the last 2 days that they've been pulling this information together, so I haven't seen a lot of it. I will be getting all this information together and getting it to Andrea. And
wonderful.
So that you can see specifically what we've been looking at. But the top 7 were the vaping and the drugs, vandalism, stealing and theft, ditching, disrespect to teachers, disrupting class, and out of school bullying. And basically the short of it is they're looking for an increase in discipline, but also the fact that a student can do this and then the student does this and they're separate, but they're doing them in the same class. But unless this elevates to 3 times, and unless this elevates to 3 times, this is my understanding of this, they're considered completely separate, and they have to do 6 things before they finally get in trouble, or 5 of the 6. So, trying to mesh those together a little bit better so that either the teachers or admin have the ability to see a student that is really just causing a lot of issues, but they're smart enough and savvy enough to realize, well, if I only do this one 2 times, and this one 2 times, and this one 2 times, and this one 2 times, I'm not getting in trouble. And they know it. They know this stuff. The kids that are consistent issues know this stuff. I wanted to go to something that Veronica said with dress codes. You guys can see, like, I'm wearing a t-shirt. Something simple like this takes care of anything below the neck. And pants, wear a belt or whatever else. I mean, that way we don't have to worry about gender or anything else like that. Is just wear something that's up here. Kirsten mentioned phones. At our school, we have a no phone policy. If it's seen, it's taken. And we're now at a point where if it's taken, the parents have to come get the phone. They have to come on campus to administration and get the phone. And if a student is really giving a lot of problems, a lot of times they're, not all the time, but a lot of times they're calling a parent saying, come get your child, because they're at such a point where they're not even being reasonable with any form of discussion. Also, another thing I looked up, and I apologize who was just speaking here. Truancy, when I looked it up here, ARS 15803C, failure for the child to attend school may result in criminal charges for the parent or the child. I'm not one for wanting to go around and charge a parent, but a simple reminder that it can happen might be a little motivation for some of these families to get their kids to school, especially if it came from our legal department. Just think it's a chain letter that simply says, hey, this is state law, because it's not just high schools, it's at the middle school as well. I have a student that has missed 101 of my classes. And that's just my class. That doesn't even include his other classes. So I wanted to get to Jeremiah and Malia because they're part of my group here. And I'm really proud of Jeremiah for going earlier. He did an awesome job. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Malia says.
Well, we appreciate you, sir, so much for leading that work and providing opportunities for students to have agency in a document that really is for them and for their behaviors. So please keep up the good work. When my program coordinator, Andrea Martinez, shared with me the great work that you were doing, I was so excited and really hopeful for tonight that your students would come, because that's how we build leaders. For our community and for our world. So thank you so much for your work. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And it's been surprising what they think is appropriate as opposed to what us adults think is appropriate.
Sure. I know that our student forums are very enlightening for sure. All right, Malia, did you have something that you wanted to share with us?
Actually, yes, I actually do. It's about the vaping thing in our
Go for it.
School, especially all of the districts. Well, for me, I think it's a big issue, and in our school, it's a very big issue too. Because just like earlier, I think somewhere in like the week or like the month, one of my teachers told me that there were people flushing the vapes down the toilet. And I think that that's a problem, but it's also like, sorry, I'm a little nervous.
You are doing phenomenal. Keep it up.
It's also like a very, very like mental problem too, because they could be using it to get away from things that they want to distract at home, at school, a lot of stuff. I think that like the minimum of it is just like way too low. It's way too low. And it doesn't say anything if they get caught multiple times. It's like more like a slap on the wrist, or like just telling your child like don't do it again, and they'll obviously do it again. Like it needs to actually be handled, and I don't really see it being handled in the school because no one really, they get searched, but people are finding a way to get past getting searched and like get like past so their vape doesn't get found or like this and that. And a lot of people are even doing it in classrooms. Like I've seen it with my own eyes, and like
Mhm.
I've heard a lot about it. It's very, very problematic
Mhm.
because I think it's at a level 2 right now for like holding drugs and
Mhm.
stuff, right? So it should be a minimum like straight up level 3 for me.
Okay.
That's my understanding of it.
Yes.
And a lot of my classmates said I was a little bit too extreme with half of the bit. So I may or may not leave it out. I don't know. But it's just like, okay, it's once. But if they get caught again and again, it's just they gotta go to drug counseling, you know?
Mhm.
Because obviously they're not learning. And they also have to like, learn from their mistakes, right?
For sure.
And if they're not learning from their mistakes and they get caught like a fourth time after they've been caught two or three times, been to drug counseling too. Also, I would like them to like help out in the school, write apology letters to their parents, the school board, the whole school. Help clean, help do a lot of things around the school. Have a whole what was it called? I forgot. A circle. I forgot what they're called.
Oh yeah.
And
Mhm. Yes.
yeah, and like that stuff, I want that stuff to be implemented. And then if they're caught a fourth time, the level should be moved up to a 5. And I think that that's where my classmates said I got a little extreme. They should go back to like drug counseling, but they should stay there because obviously they haven't learned their lesson.
Mhm.
And they should have to repeat the year. That's where got a little too extreme for them. But
Mhm.
I think since they're focusing more on getting the drug and using the drug in school, they're not focused on school. What makes you think they're gonna like, try? And they gotta learn after a long time. And if they're not trying in school right now, then how will they get as far as they need to be when when they're an adult?
Mhm. Mhm.
So if they repeat the year, it'll teach them to learn from their mistakes. It's just like flunking, because obviously later in life they're probably going to drop out. They're probably going to, get bad grades in school. It's
Mhm.
going to be a lot of things that's going to happen to them. And obviously, if they get the help they need and if they, repeat the year and stuff,
Mhm.
then I don't think that's going to be a problem with them.
Mhm. Mhm. I definitely, you've made some really valid points, and a really big takeaway for me in the Office of Student Relations is when you talk about the help and supports that kids can get while still having really substantial consequences, so that people know you need to take this seriously, but we're also here to help you. So that balance is really important. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because oftentimes we can forget as adults that every child is making a choice, and an adult too that might be a cry out for help, or they may need more supports. So thank you for finding that balance. And I just, sell usage and sharing is a higher level, if you're sharing it or selling it than just using it. So you're right. So looking at that, wow, very articulate student court, bringing it tonight. Thank you. Oh, super proud of you.
Um,
Right.
I would also like to add about
Mhm.
a lot of graffiti and vandalism
Yes.
too in our school. I've seen it a lot in the bathrooms, a
Mhm.
lot on the lockers too.
Yes.
And I think that the way that they do it is just very, minor. Because if they just scribble on the table and they're like, "Oh shoot," I think that should
Mhm.
just be level 1. But if they caught doing it again and again and again and again,
Mhm.
then obviously it moves up to level 2, level 3. They gotta help out in the school, sweep, clean it, and especially with that. Also, was fighting on there? I think fighting
Yes.
was on there, right? Yeah, I would like
Yes.
to talk about fighting.
Okay.
I've been in a few fights myself. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
And I think that the way it's treated isn't very fair. The way that I mean, if both students actively participate in the fight and they both wanted to fight, then yes, both students should be punished accordingly to how the code says it should be. But
Mhm.
if one of the students was just trying to defend themselves because the other one attacked them first, and they also get suspended because they were the one that had to, fought, I don't really
Mhm.
think that's right, because if you can't do anything to stop it. It's
Mhm.
if you don't fight back, it's social suicide and you get hurt. And if you do fight back, then you get in trouble with the school. I
Mhm.
don't think there's any way where you can win in that
Mhm.
situation. And
Mhm.
obviously, I get it. Students shouldn't be fighting, but there's some points where like people just want to fight and the other person just doesn't want it.
Mhm.
Because I've been in that situation before myself, actually.
Mhm.
I was I didn't want to fight somebody, and
Mhm.
they hit me first, so it started a whole fight, and a
Mhm.
lot of stuff happened. I didn't really think in the situation I was in was very, right, because I was just a victim of self-defense, you know?
Mhm.
They were the ones that attacked me first, and I couldn't really just stand there and do nothing while they were attacking me. I just had to fight back. And I
Mhm.
didn't really hit them at all. I just held them on the ground until I got pulled off of them.
Okay. Well, the distinction between self-defense and a fight and an assault, right? Making those things really clear in the code of conduct is important. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
All right.
Malia. We really appreciate your input.
Thank
So
you.
we'll have one last speaker, Jeremiah. If I have put in the chat the website, the webpage for Code of Conduct, as well as the email, if you think of anything after you leave the meeting today. I do want to try and honor people's time. So Jeremiah will be our last speaker, and then we'll wrap up for the day. So Jeremiah, it's all yours.
I agree with Malaya, but I also
Mhm.
like to take on bullying, because like
Okay.
if you tell on someone, this also refers back to fighting, of how Malia said it,
Mhm.
that say if someone's like smoking or vaping and you
Yes.
tell on them, then they would get mad and start bullying you, or it could cause a fight.
Mhm.
And like Malaya said, that you can't really fight back, because then that would be retaliation.
Mhm. Okay.
So I kind of do feel that bullying in and out of school should be more than just like 1 day suspension or ISI,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
because then it's just gonna make it into a bigger deal. It's gonna keep escalating into something bigger, like a fight, or starts bullying, and then it'll cause a whole big scene.
Agreed. I'm glad you brought up bullying, Jeremiah. It comes up, but not as frequently as I thought it might, because that interplays, that has to do with the fights, the assaults, threats, and intimidation. So that is a level 3, and it can carry a short-term suspension. But looking back at the level that it sits at, is something we for sure can do, because you're right, it's not isolated. I love that we started with you, Jeremiah, and we're ending with you, Jeremiah. That's as it should be. And we have more opportunities for virtual forums. March 15th, next week, we'll have another one from 6 to 7. So if you have student court from Safford who'd like to join us again, and other students, that's another opportunity. I just want to thank you all so very much for taking an hour out of your evenings to speak with us. And thank you to those folks on my team for my department, and those of you who are on our steering committee. It's really lovely to see you here tonight, so that you can take these ideas back when we meet on Monday. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ms. Lionheart, for facilitating. We appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.